Unfortunately, you have no idea what you actually look like to other people. But in this video, we're going to tell you 4 methods to get a better sense of how other people see you. In order to utilize these methods, you first need to understand the reasons why you don't know how you look, as once you understand the perceptual obstacles on the landscape, it becomes much easier to navigate around them. First, here's why, or rather how, the mirror lies to you. Most people, when they look in the mirror, subconsciously put a specific facial expression that they don't generally use elsewhere. You can test this yourself by having someone you know look at themselves in the mirror while you are next to them. You'll see that they will tilt their head a certain way, or lift their eyebrows slightly, or pout their lips, or do something to alter their facial posture while they're generally looking at themselves, and it's not how they look day to day. Chances are that you probably do the same thing and you just don't realize it. Further, staring at yourself from exactly eye level from a few feet away in your bathroom lighting doesn't capture your full spectrum of looks, such as the way people might see you on a date in a restaurant, in a meeting in a boardroom, or even outside on a walk. In other words, this isn't the setting that people see you when it actually matters. Finally, since you see yourself in the mirror every day, multiple times a day, you become numb to the stimuli of your own appearance. You know how you stop hearing the background noise in your house after a certain amount of time, like subtle hums of the fridge? The same thing happens with your face. You become so accustomed to it that it's hard to really see it for what it is. And this is true regardless of your real-world appearance. For instance, in a recent interview, David Gandy said that he was self-conscious of his nose and his ears, which he views as far too large. Remarkably, even the most successful male model ever can't see how attractive he is. An extreme example, granted, but this is happening with all of us to all of our facial features simultaneously. Your brain isn't able to process your whole face together objectively because you are numb to the stimuli. We think this explains why, when you look at Tobias Grantmeyer's attractiveness studies, unattractive people overrate themselves and attractive people underrate themselves, such that most people rate themselves as slightly above average looking, regardless of how attractive they are actually to other people. Your own face is always going to look normal to yourself because to you, it's the most familiar face in the world. And photos are actually even less true to how others see you than compared to the mirror. And this is, as a matter of fact, another artifact of seeing yourself in the mirror every day. Your brain has become accustomed to the flipped version of yourself that you see in the mirror. And so by now, your brain naturally adjusts for all of your slight asymmetries, and you get used to the left side of your face as your left and the right side of your face as your right. But then when you see a photo, it's suddenly flipped compared to what you used to, and those asymmetries your mind was compensating for in one direction are now asymmetrical in the same direction you were compensating for, making them look literally twice as extreme as they would to someone who's never seen you before. Further, seeing things like your beauty mark move to the other side of your face or your cowlick switch eyebrows just makes your whole aesthetic seem peculiar, even if these features are actually quite pleasant. And while lens distortion has been overhyped a bit, it is quite real. Take a look at this example posted by John Bear, as it's a useful teaching tool. In the left video, he looks normal, but in the right video, he looks quite strange. That's because in the right video, he's using a wide-angle lens held close to the face. In simple terms, wide-angle lenses slightly compress the periphery of images relative to the center, which can create barrel distortion. And close-range shots make items closer to the camera appear larger than they are, and this is called perspective distortion. In Bear's example, these two effects combine to create a few changes. You can see how his nose appears larger, his jaw appears narrower, his bizygomatic width appears smaller, his eyes appear closer to the sides of the face, and his hairline appears further back. The typical selfie also uses a wide-angle lens held close to the face, and so these changes happen in your selfies too, just in a less extreme way. For example, Watertowl found that a selfie taken 12 inches from your face can make your nose look up to 30% bigger than it actually is. And since the most common way people see photos of themselves is through the front camera, this is also a distortion of your self-image. Finally, photos completely freeze expressivity, which is a major component of one's attractiveness. How your face moves, that is, how your expressions change when you speak and react, can radically alter how your beauty is perceived. Take a look at this graph from Rhodes et al., where the x-axis shows individuals' static attractiveness, that is, how attractive they are rated in a photo, and the y-axis shows how attractive they are rated on a video. Sure, the overall correlation is pretty tight, but you can see that it does vary dramatically individual by individual. For instance, you can see that these individuals were all rated about a 5 in photos, but on video, some were a 6, whereas others were a 3. Think about that for a moment. For many people, expressivity alone is the difference between being considered unattractive and being considered good-looking. And so, now that you understand what's stopping you from seeing your face the way other people see it, we can discuss techniques that get around these obstacles. The first method is to set up a phone camera to take a video of yourself or have someone film you from at least 5 feet away, speaking naturally from different angles. If you show a video like this to someone else, they'll likely say, yeah, that's more or less how you look in real life. Now edit the video and flip it such that it's mirrored, and this way you don't get the weird effect where you look super asymmetrical. If you watch this video, this is more or less how people who know you perceive your face. With this method, we've corrected for your unnatural mirror expression, the unique bathroom lighting and distance, the camera distortion that comes with close-up shots, the loss of expressivity in photos, and the unfamiliarity of mirrored images. However, one thing we haven't corrected for is exposure. You still see your face all the time, and depending on your personality, this can warp your perception of your own looks in either direction. And while this technique might give you a more objectively accurate way of looking at your own features than you're normally used to, it's going to be subjectively hard for you to assess how good do I actually look. The next 3 methods are going to correct for that, and if you combine this method with 1 or 2 of the other 3, you get a more accurate self-image. The second is to get an outside opinion. Ultimately, in one sense, attractiveness does have a strong subjective element to it. It's much like taste. Some people will prefer strawberries, others will prefer kale, but both have a standard for what they prefer. However, there are obviously objective facts about what the average person will prefer and collective subjective perspectives. If most people subjectively prefer the taste of strawberries to kale, well, then it's an objective fact that they are tastier to the average person. Similarly, just as a random example, if most people subjectively prefer brighter scleras as indicated by Provin et al.'s study, it's an objective fact that brighter scleras are more attractive on average, even if it's a fact about subjective perspectives. And if most people find you attractive, it is an objective fact that you are attractive to most people. So in theory, you can really figure out your attractiveness by mainly asking others. It's interesting, but we actually could easily modify the technology that we already have at Koovs to estimate how others would rate your face on average and give you a rating. And while we did flirt with the idea of offering this as a service, ultimately we decided against it. Because while it can be fun to figure out if you're in the 20th or the 50th or the 70th percentile for beauty, as an actual service, it's really not that useful, as it doesn't give you any direction as to how to improve your appearance. So what we do instead with our products is we rate them on where they are relative to where we think they could be. In other words, their own potential without surgery, and we tell them how to get there. Anyway, the tricky part of method 2 is that most people don't really have the incentive to tell you the truth. Ideally, you know some people who can give you an honest assessment, but a friend won't want to hurt your feelings. And while you can use one of those face rating subreddits, some of those actually probably will want to hurt your feelings because that's just how people are. So here is, in our opinion, the most accurate way a regular person can get a ballpark of their own attractiveness. In 1988, a psychologist named Alan Feingold did a meta-analysis of studies that had the opportunity to compare people's ratings of attractiveness with those of their partners, and found a correlation of 0.39, 0.49 after correcting for attenuation. And this finding has held up in more modern research on the subject. For reference, this is what a 0.49 correlation looks like. It's real, but one data point isn't going to tell you very much. So if you pick out one random person you've dated as a measure of your attractiveness, it's not going to be that useful. But let's say you have 4 exes. If you averaged all of their attractiveness, it could give you a ballpark estimate of how attractive you are. So method 3 is to review your own dating history. With rare exceptions, when someone says that someone is dating out of their league, it's actually usually nonsense, because the fact that they're dating them is a strong sign that you are, in fact, in their league. So if you want to figure out what your league is, you can usually just tell by the people you've dated. Basically, everyone is trying to date the best person that they can get. And so most people end up dating someone about as good looking as themselves. And so you can take a rough average of how attractive the people you've dated are, and that's likely about as attractive as you are. 2 things though. First, women are generally somewhat better looking than men on average. So if you date people of the opposite gender, you do have to correct for that. It's not that you're as good looking as they are, it's that you're likely in a similar percentile for your gender. Second, this doesn't apply for short-term relationships, since, on average, men tend to lower their standards for uncommitted relationships. And so it's actually pretty common for women to have short-term flings or situationships with men who are much better looking than them, whereas it's not as common the other way around. But what if you haven't had any committed relationships? Well, then this brings us to method number 4. You can look at your options on dating apps. App algorithms are widely suspected to work like competitive matchmaking, such that someone swiping positively on you puts you in a more desirable pool, and someone swiping negatively on you puts you in a less desirable pool. So the people the app algorithm shows you are the people who are at a similar level of desirability for their gender, the ones who are quote unquote in your league on the app. However, this isn't quite as good a method as looking at your own dating history, as number one, it's mostly a reflection of how attractive your photos are, which, as we've covered, aren't perfect. And number two, there are more men than women on the app, and app users are a minority of the population. So your percentile on an app won't necessarily match a percentile in the real world. And number three, long-term and short-term dating motivations are confounded on the apps. So it's hard to know whether someone you match with sees you as dateable or just looking for something casual. So to review, if you want to get a ballpark estimate of how your features really look and how attractive you are to others, you can look at a mirrored version of yourself taken from a distance, ask others for an objective assessment, look at your dating history, and look at your dating app options. If you want us to analyze your face, well then click the link in bio at Coders.com.